Welcome to the Path Podcast. It's August 23rd, 2023. My name is Tani. I'm here with Auk, and I'm really pleased to introduce Zach also. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Auk.
Hey, Tani. Welcome, Zach. It's good to have you on the show finally.
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming. you listen to it for long enough and get to watch all the actual video footage online for a while. It's kind of funny to actually be sitting in the chair now. It's a little different take.
So Zach is one of the managers at the Path, which means he's one of 6 individuals who's on the schedule on a weekly basis to sometimes kind of run the show. We call it be the key, or it's kind of the point person for the day. Every one of those people also has other responsibilities in the shop. For example, Brian's one of our managers, and his other responsibilities include he's our purchaser, our buyer. Zach's other responsibilities mostly have to do with being keeping the service department running smoothly and holding the techs, training techs, organizing tools, but general service manager type stuff.
More or less, yeah.
And by organizing tools, I more mean like where do they go, not are they there.
That's a more apt description, yeah.
So Zach is kind of an encyclopedia. His recall on facts about things like bike geometry, travel, torque specs, compatibility,
Headsets.
all features is kind of legendary, I would say. Pretty awesome.
I'll recognize customers' bikes long before I recognize the person riding them. It's just a lot easier that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And his research skills are legendary.
Yes, and we'll circle back on your trance, but that's Zach's brainchild, and so that's where research meets kind of creativity and imagination, right? Like,
more or less, yeah. I think it all starts with a really developed passion on a certain topic, and when you're able to kind of expand that topic onto like a lot of close friends around you, it just makes it all the better.
Is that close enough to the microphone? Again, anyway, you can let us know. So we're going to do some shop news, and then we'll get a little bit more into Zach's story. We'll do some listener questions. We'll talk about Auks Trans Elite, and we've got lots more to talk about on top of that.
Fantastic.
Too. So it might be a bit of a long show. We'll see. Shop news and also just general news around. There's a chance to do a foundational mountain bike skills clinic with Lee Donovan and Gina Miller on Saturday, September 16th. I think that's a great opportunity for really anybody. I think it was Shaquille O'Neal who said fundamentals.
With Lee Donovan specifically. I'm saying that.
So Saturday, September 18th, both Gina and Lee are both awesome individuals, really fun to be around, the kind of person that you can learn from without kind of feeling uncomfortable.
And is this open to guys and girls?
I didn't see anything to the contrary on my quick check.
Yep.
So I think so.
I think it is. Actually, I think that might have been a frequently asked question. And so Lee and Gina, they're big in, offering up women's training seminars and what have you. This one is open to everyone. So we all get to gain the benefit of some awesome coaches.
Yep.
And riders.
We have the OC Fremont Canyon race coming up on September 9th. I think you've gone to that, right? Zach? You've done like neutral support and had a tent there before?
I think I've worked that one for the past 2 years, and I'll be at this coming one as well.
So that's an opportunity to ride in an area that usually you can't ride in except on limited basis, special times with a docent?
Exactly, yeah. It's very, very limited access on, I believe it's the western side of San Diego Canyon Road. And it's a really, really exciting venue where because it's somewhere that you never get to ride on your own. It's a really cool opportunity to get out there and see something new in Orange County, which doesn't happen all the time in terms of mountain bike trails.
And it's scenic, it's super scenic.
It is very, yeah.
And have you ridden the course?
I have not. I've only gotten the chance to work on all the bikes out there.
Do you know what the course is like say elevation change or anything like that?
I think last year, the main course, because I think they have a couple of different options. I think there's a beginner and there's an expert, 2 different courses. The expert course, I think, had around what I remember, 2,500 feet of elevation
Solid.
gain, something like
Yeah.
that. It's a pretty decent
And
climb.
there's some single track back there.
A lot of single track, a little bit of fire road, nothing overly technical because it is focused mainly around the XC-ish crowd. But no, there's a good variation of up and down there.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely something worth checking out if you're into getting your XC on. We'll be closed on Labor Day. It's normal for us. Watch out for an announcement from us soon for when we're going to move. We don't have a date yet. I think it'll probably be in September. It's a half mile down the street to 649 South B Street. We probably will not announce a date until we're 2 weeks from that date. Because as soon as I know enough to be 2 weeks from a date, I'll announce it, and I don't quite know if I can know before then. So we are getting very close. The project, Zach was over there the other day.
Going through all the workbenches, tool setups, all that jazz.
Wow, that's fantastic.
I think for me, it sounds like a small thing, but one of the things I'm really most excited about in the new space is that there are wide walkways all around the workshop on all sides, and the workshop itself is not a walkway.
Right.
Which is currently not the case, and it's rough.
Yeah. I feel like we've always made it work as best as possible here, but having the ability to actually set up the service department all the ways that we want to is going to be such a huge bonus for us.
You got to be kind of a tight-knit group to have someone walking past you with a repair bike and have to kind of slide out of the way a little bit while you're working on a bike and have it be okay.
Not to mention having that 10 times an hour, give or take.
Yeah. So we're gonna be in even better moods when you come in.
I'm excited to see how much more, I guess, efficient the bike from service riding into the back of the shop to repair, repair storage and pickup.
Really where it affects are the riders is how efficient it is to go get your repair bike when you come to pick it up. Because right now, I would say on average that's about a 7-minute process, and if we're struggling, it can be more.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be about a 1-minute process, so that'll be awesome. And I think that'll also be replicated on the incoming end, but that affects the customers less overall.
It's going to be interesting having basically a direct connection between the shop and the sales department, because right now we have the whole breezeway
with a stair set in the way.
Right, exactly, with other businesses above
Two
us.
doors, a stairway.
Yeah, there's a lot of intermediary space between the two, and having a single door between the two spaces is going to be a big change for us. Not necessarily in a negative, it's just different.
Right.
So other news, we've been talking a lot on the staff lately, and we've been promoting in our newsletter that we welcome the opportunity to match competitors' prices, and that's because so many of our competitors are having sales.
Right.
And we never stopped matching competitors' prices when asked. We usually do it, even during the pandemic. But during the pandemic, so few things were on sale anywhere that I think it kind of fell off the radar.
Mm.
And I think some of our newer customers don't even know we do it. So we're talking about it and making sure people know, because we want to win your business on service and on being the shop you want to work with, but we know we need to be competitive on price too. So we're here to do that.
Great. So if I'm looking online at the web store, how might I inquire about that?
You can message us directly from the web store on the Message Us. You can message us on our web on our shop phone number, 714-669-0784. I like that actually, because it's just your regular messaging app.
Sure.
You can also email us at support@the Path Bike Shop, or you can email me directly at Tani at the Path Bike Shop. Or you could email Zach at the Path Bike Shop.
That is actually incorrect. That would be going to Zach Still.
Which would also be pretty sweet.
Which would be, yeah. I think he forwards me 3 or 4 emails a week at this point. It's kind of just a known thing. Every morning he has to go through and forward something.
You could probably get to Zach at service testing at the Path.
Service testing at the Path would be one of the easiest ways, yeah.
Other news, we have some demo bikes for sale. Some highlights include our shuttle LTs, because I want to bring in fresh ones and get some shuttle AMs. So we're doing 64-34, and those we've only had them for maybe 6 months or something. They're pretty. They're in great shape. So
Yeah, most of them have a handful of rides on them, if that.
we tune them up. We make sure everything's fresh and nothing's about to wear out or run out on it, and it'll be a good experience. We have a handful of demo bikes on sale. At the other end of the spectrum, we have Process 134 large for $16.89, and a handful in between there. I think that's pretty much. Oh, Score bikes are now 20% off. And here's a big one. We stopped charging shipping on any bike that we sell right now. If we have a bike on our web catalog, you can order it, and we do not charge shipping. There are 1 or 2 brands left that we're not allowed to ship. And other than that, check out our web catalog. Free shipping for bikes. Used to be $150 for bikes under $3,000.
Even at $150, that's a smoking deal.
Yeah, but it's not. It's free now.
And it's free now, which is even more amazing.
Yep. Cool. I think we should circle back a little bit, and you want to talk about, Zach, about kind of your first experiences with mountain biking and your first experience at the Path and your NICA days and stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. So I feel like a lot of my friends that kind of got into mountain biking all happened mainly throughout high school. I went to Foothill High School up the road, graduated in 2017. And it kind of just started with a friend that was, he rode with his dad fairly often, and him and I, just friends in high school from classes and whatnot. And he's like, hey, do you want to try mountain biking? I know you, dirt bikes. I've been riding dirt bikes since I was 3. So it kind of started on wheels with that. So moving to mountain bikes is fairly natural progression. I feel like there's a lot of skills between those two sports that really cross over, obviously with the 2-wheel stuff. And I knew my dad had an old 1998 Specialized rock hopper in the garage, and that was the mountain bike to me. That's what I knew as a mountain bike. Just some old little hardtail with this little squishy fork on the front and some knobby tires, and a nice dark yellow plastic dork disc that if you looked at wrong, it would crack and explode into 1,000 pieces. make sure that's on there.
Right.
Period.
Dad'd probably be pissed if that happened.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Story gets worse. So went on that first ride with that friend of mine and was immediately hooked after that. I was like, okay, now I can do this.
How many years ago is that?
That has to be 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
I think that was probably when I was like 13, 14, something like that in high school. It was like my freshman or sophomore year or something like that. But immediately after that, I was hooked. So I rode that rock hopper until the head tube cracked on it. So as if anyone is surprised by that.
Was it around the lower headset cup?
No, it was actually split right up the center.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it was a good one. It was a good one. But shortly after that, I actually found my way into here because my friend at the time had rode with the Foothill mountain bike team. It's also where Chris Taylor and Ben Bennett, a couple old pathletes.
Super legends.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. They started on that team. I kind of met them through that whole thing. But I found my way in here, ended up getting a 2013 Scott Scale 940.
Ooh, nice.
That was the
Excellent.
very first mountain bike that true mountain bike.
You
that
say
I actually had.
2013?
2013, yeah.
So that was okay. It was one of the ones we had on sale, maybe.
It was a clearance bike outside.
I remember when we had a bunch of scales on sale.
Yeah, it was a black, blue, and gray one outside. And the key features that I remember, and I told my dad, that's the one I need to have because it had a Fox fork on it.
There you go.
That was the only thing I cared about. That's all it needed.
Do you remember who helped you?
Yeah, I think it was Frost.
Nice.
It was Frost way
awesome.
back then. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, but that was a 3x10, just awesome bike to start with back then. I think that era was kind of funny because right in that 2013-14 time frame was right when I think the move to one by really started to become a little more mainstream. Right. That's when SRAM was unveiling the X01 and XX1 drivetrains kind of right about that same time. Right. So getting on that 3x10 and then immediately going out and doing some of the over the hump races out of Irvine Lake and then seeing these guys on these full one bys like, oh, those nerds, they're missing all those rings in the front. And then they blast by me in the chute and I never see them again. But no, that was the first bike that I started on, and that's what really got me hooked is that one specifically.
So when you closed your eyes when you were 13, 14 getting into it, what was your ride fantasy?
I don't even know if I had one back then. I think the biggest thing was just being able to get on the bike and go out and pedal. I think just starting out with the whole thing, I didn't really have an idea of what the ride fantasy was. All I knew was, oh yeah, you go out to Auks and you do this little loop, or you go out to Aliso and go up the creek trail and then struggle up Choya, stop 10 times, and then come back down Choya, head back to the car. That's where it started.
Right.
that was the ride. You know what? No, the ride fantasy was making it all the way up Choya in one go. That was the start.
I think that's probably super relatable for a lot of our local customers.
Yeah, I feel like
in terms of getting into it.
Right, exactly. I was lucky enough to have a little bit of a two-wheeled background being on moto,
right?
But so I knew how to stay upright on the bike. But in terms of any actual fitness or pedaling skill, nothing. Not a chance.
I think my ride fantasy was making it up Big Red without stopping. In Peters Canyon, right?
Exactly.
It's a similar...
Same thing, just different area. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and then it becomes doing it in one harder gear,
right,
et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
right. Totally. So you raced NICA quite a bit.
I did, yeah. So my first year of racing NICA was my sophomore year, which would have been 2015, that's when I started doing NICA. So I did that my sophomore, junior, and senior year, going through junior varsity and going all through that stuff, and it was an absolute blast. And I think that's what really got me. I was hooked on it before, but that's what really got me stuck into the whole bike scene. I was into it when I first started, but that's what really kind of solidified all that stuff and made me go like, okay, no, this is what I'm doing. This is rad.
Was it not till after NICA that you started to get into like full suspension bikes and jumps, or was it during that?
No. So it was actually, I went another couple of years before I owned a full suspension. I was hardtail for life for the first 5 years of the 11-ish years I've been riding now. So after that scale, I had a 2016 BMC Team Elite, the one with a little bit of squishy in the back. Right. That thing was rad. I had that
Softail.
Exactly. Yeah, Softail. Exactly. But that was my only bike for 3 years when I graduated high school, and I was riding that down luge as hard as I could, taking it down Hawk, Chutes Ridgeline, like all the trails that we can view as like aggressive around here. Sure. There's not a trail that I wouldn't do on that bike, and sometimes it ended up having an OTB because you have a 69.5 degree head tube angle on a 100 mil fork, but
you're a throwback.
That's how you got to start. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of us from the previous era had that same experience.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So after NICA, after high school, I think your first job was Performance. Is that true?
Yeah, I worked at Performance Bike, RIP. Started there in the Tustin marketplace, basically right after I graduated high school. I actually worked there with Jake and a couple other friends, Juan and Cooper, who also work here. There was the four of us over there, were the original kind of squad of us. But I worked there for about a year and a half before they went bankrupt. And then in February of 19 is where I ended up coming over here. So I've been here for about 4.5 years now.
It's been awesome too. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm super stoked. So anything else we should talk about that's Super Zach related before we start doing listener questions and stuff?
Ooh, Super Zach related. Oh,
we can always circle back. Stuff will come up.
How did this happen?
Well, I don't. That's news to me. It's the first I'm seeing it. Interesting. The best way I can describe that is a gap jump that didn't go according to plan.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that was a trip up to Idaho with a couple of friends. Jason Denny, I think you guys both know him. Went up there to see a friend, and the very first day of a 10-day trip, quarter mile into riding, immediately knocked out, no recollection of what had just happened.
Oh, my goodness.
Like, oh, my wrist hurts. That's weird. Went to the doctor, and oh yeah, your radius is fractured. Have fun on your trip.
Oh my god!
So you drove for 15 hours or so to ride for that far and crash?
Pretty much, yeah.
And then you drove yourself home.
Well. So before I drove the 14 hours straight back home, I did about 900 miles of off-road driving, all one-handed with this arm in a splint and a sling, sleeping in the back of the car for the 10 days previously.
Was Luke there too, or just Jason?
No, Luke didn't make it on that trip. He was busy doing family stuff, having a kid.
Right.
So he wasn't able to make that one. But
Jason
whatever,
and
that's
Luke are
fine.
rigged, and Luke used to work at the Path too. So
Yes.
shout out to those guys.
Very, very
Check
good
out
friends.
their overlanding awesomeness.
Yeah, but so that was a very interesting way to start a big trip that we've been planning for a couple months. What wasn't ideal by any means, but in no way did it break the spirit of the trip. It was fantastic.
Cool. That is rugged of you.
Yeah.
Should we get into some listener questions?
Sure. All right. So to everyone who's been chiming in on my posts on my feed for listener questions, thank you very much.
100%.
It's fantastic. Yeah, thank you. So we'll jump right into it. Let's see. What is your take? So EA9918918.
That's who the question's from.
Oh, I know that guy.
Yeah, I know that guy.
You would know that guy.
Actually, I think it's Ed from Denver. Ed from Denver asks, what's your take on 152 millimeter e-bike cranks?
So I just wonder why the specificity of 152.
Right.
In general, we've talked a lot on the show about how I'm a fan of shorter cranks in general. I think all of us on the show are generally a fan of the direction of cranks getting shorter. We can revisit benefits and trade-offs of shorter cranks, but of 152 in specific, I would say the main benefit would be if that was the best length for you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's not far. I would say if 150 felt too short, but 155 felt too long,
Oh my God.
you know what's in the middle? 152.
I suspect most people can't feel that difference.
I
It
would
tough
be
to tell.
I would be shocked if I could even tell a difference between those two blindfolded riding them on a trail.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you like 155, you could try 152.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, also, I would say that the available options right now for 150 or 155 cranks aren't necessarily inexpensive options out there. They can be
Right.
pretty pricey depending on what bike or configuration you need. And if there's a company making a 152 mil option that is much more budget friendly,
Go for it.
right for me, right there, done. That's it. I would
If you're
happily
if
run
you're just
152s.
in the range.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
What are you running on most of your bikes now?
On basically every single one of my pedal bikes, I'm running a 165 millimeter, just because that's kind of what I have, and it's the shortest that Cane Creek had
But you used to
available
run
in wings.
175s, right?
Oh yeah, that's why I started 175s across the board.
And then
Gradually went to 170s because that's what came on my Gen 1 Mega Tower, and then was like, oh, let's run a little shorter, try these 165s, and couldn't pull me off them now.
if you were buying cranks for a pedal enduro bike now, and you could get any length you want, what do you think you would get?
I would, if I could buy any length in the specific cranks that I like, I'd probably get 160s,
Yep.
maybe toying with 155s, but that might be getting a little short for my personal preferences.
Yep. Auk?
I think I would go 160 on a pedal bike.
Yep.
Yeah.
I currently am 160 on a pedal bike, and I think I might be almost ready for 155. Last time I tried 155, I felt not quite ready for it. But also, to me, I do think that when the cranks start to get really short, I don't think that matches up well with a bike with long chainstays.
Interesting.
I think it'd be very proportional because it directly relates where your foot position is in relation to that rear axle, and in a sense, I think there is a too long of a distance between those two. There's too short of a distance, and if you run 100 mil cranks with a 500 mil chainstay, obviously not going to work very well, and vice versa too.
I think with that short of cranks, it's difficult for me to get my center of mass back far enough behind the rear axle to really properly pull the front wheel up in some situations. I do feel like as the cranks get shorter, it gets more difficult for me to lift the front wheel off the ground. And I feel like with a longer chainstay, that's more true.
I'd agree with that, yeah. And
So-
no manuals, no bueno.
No bueno. But also no manual. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't manual. But it's like, okay, but that also means no bunny hop.
It's
Right.
it's going to be a number of things at that point.
And
People tend to not see how much they are doing what I would say like mini manuals when
yeah.
they're riding on basically any type of descending terrain.
Like picking your front wheel up over
Correct.
like a curb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something as simple as that is a miniature manual for a split second.
And also even just unweighting the front wheel.
Yeah.
and kind of maybe sliding it over to a direction a little bit,
Right.
pivoting on your rear wheel a little bit.
Getting it up just enough over that obstacle that's coming your way.
Cool. Next
Fantastic.
question, or do we have more on that one?
Nope. That's fantastic.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Montner 12.
Hey, Mike. Shout out to Mike. We know
I do
Mike.
know that guy.
Love that. Much love, Mike.
Hope Colorado's doing cool.
It is. He told me today.
Nice.
Oh, fantastic. He asks, provide an in-depth explanation. Actually, doesn't say provide. He just says in-depth explanation of anti-squat versus anti-rise.
So
I asked for techie questions because I knew you were coming on the show,
That is a
Zach.
loaded question. Yeah.
I think I could make it pretty simple overall, and then we can get into some of the nuances and kind of buts.
Yeah.
Anti-squat. Okay, let's talk about what rise and squat are in this context first.
Yep.
So squat in this context is when you're riding a bike and you accelerate and the rear suspension compresses.
Right.
It's mass transfer towards the rear, which would compress suspension. Yeah, exactly.
So you're saying what causes it is mass transfer. Really, as when a mass accelerates, its center of mass moves back. When a mass decelerates, its center of mass moves forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
Rise is when you decelerate on a bicycle. In this context, is when you decelerate on a full suspension bicycle and the rear suspension decompresses or elevates or goes up in its travel. So anti-squat would be things that stop the bike from squatting under acceleration. Anti-rise would be things that stop the bike from decompressing or rising up in the suspension under braking.
Yeah, essentially the bike's ability to resist a change in the suspension is what they could, I
Due to
guess, both
acceleration
get.
or braking, depending on which one it is.
Yeah, they would both get categorized under that same.
And now I want to add some nuance. When you slow down on a bike, the fork compresses for the same reason, because your center of mass moved forward, and the rear shock decompresses. And this can be kind of like a self-reinforcing cycle, because as your fork compresses and your rear shock decompresses, your weight shifts more forward.
Yeah, it's a.
Yep.
The one influences the other, and it just keeps. It's
that's
like
bad.
a snowball effect.
Right,
Essentially.
that's bad.
Yeah.
So that's just a little side note about the whole conversation. I think mostly when people are talking about anti-squat and anti-rise in bike suspension, they're talking about essentially the chain force resisting squat due to acceleration for anti-squat, and they're talking about brake force resisting rise due to braking in rise. I do also think that damping, like rebound damping, can play a role in fighting brake rise. It will slow it down and maybe even slow it down until you're past the event. Same with compression damping can play a role in fighting squat.
And the other side of that too, depending on what gear you're in on your cassette, that will resist your anti-squat as well.
Well, it'll literally change your anti-squat number.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the reason for that is that one of the key elements of all this is instant center. And there's three components there's three lines that meet at your instant center, and one of those lines is the line across the top of your chain. So if you change any gears, that line changes.
Exactly.
And in this day and age where you're running a 51 tooth or 52 tooth on the back, that can be significant.
Yeah.
It's a huge change. And the change between the two gears too, because if you drop down one, that could be a 5 to 8 tooth jump, which is a catastrophic change in the anti-squat value.
Catastrophic.
I like that. Catastrophic change.
I would say
we're using big words. It's the tech show.
Yeah.
That one had at least 3 syllables in it.
Yeah. There's some really fun diagrams on Pink Bike and other resources that you can look at to see what people mean when they talk about, say, 100% anti-squat or 150% anti-squat. And it's the line through the bottom link, the line through the top link, and the line across the top of your chain where those meet in the front of the bike is the instant center. And then if you draw some lines from the rear tire patch and the front tire patch through that and do some math, you can calculate anti-squat and you can I think based on that, you can also calculate anti-rise on that same diagram.
Yeah, you can.
So anything to add?
I think that pretty much sums it up in terms that the majority of listeners, I feel, would understand without getting into the weeds about the whole thing. I mean, because we
can get into some of the stuff. I mean, I think a lot of anti-squat qualities have to do with chain growth on the suspension.
Absolutely.
Or initial rearward wheel movement. But it also has to do with that instant center thing, and those two are different topics.
Yeah. I feel like this is one of those topics where I feel like I've never learned fully enough about these, because every bike is so different. Every suspension kinematic is so different. Like the difference in anti-squat from a single pivot bike versus a single pivot linkage driven bike versus a VPP versus DW. All of these are going to be so drastically different from each other, but it's all in the same realm. And all you have to do is
move one of the pivots a few millimeters and it changes, and it can still be the same type of suspension.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would say that a true single pivot is a little more limited in how you can tune some of these things.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
But you can still definitely get anti-squat into a true single pivot. Anti-rise, I remember back in the day when Turner was a big, important brand for us, and they were basically using a horse link, and Ellsworth, who had somehow got this patent on this thing they called instant center tracking, which was basically a zone that the instant center would be in. And they managed to make that a defendable patent. And they got Turner to essentially, long story, they got Turner to move the link from the chainstay to the seat stay. And one of the things Turner kind of started pitching about this is like, well, we did this. It had some trade-offs. We really like the anti-rise quality because it added anti-rise to the bike to move that pivot.
Right, because in theory, your brake caliper would be mounted to the chainstay itself instead of to the seat stay, which would be an independent part of the bike that would be separate from the rear axle.
But it also moved one of the points that create the line for the instant center.
Yeah.
And then I want to add to that too, on this diagram where that engineers use to calculate anti-rise and anti-squat. One of the key things is the center of mass of the rider. And that it's kind of a theoretical thing that they're calculating based on an average body distribution at a given saddle height.
Right.
So
which is constantly varying.
So that's
whenever
not
you're pedaling.
an exact science.
Yeah.
It's going to change with a different, saddle height, and with like maybe someone has a lot of their mass up around their chest and they're going to have a different center of mass than someone who, say, has a lot of mass around their thighs.
Sure. Yeah.
So complicated stuff.
Right.
Lots of numbers and angles and all that jazz.
Yeah. I think these days, with anti-rise, a lot of people are talking about brake neutrality, which is where the braking forces do the minimum number of interacting with the suspension to keep the suspension from rising, which some people, I think, in a way might be defined as 100% anti-rise.
Does this have anything to do with the high pivot pulley systems that we're seeing on bikes?
I think that has more to do with, yes, but I think it has more to do with pedal kickback.
Right.
So yes, the high single pivot bikes, they allow for an extremely rearward initial wheel path, which is rad. It makes them feel very bump racing because they're moving with the direction the bump is pushing them instead of just more up and down.
It just gets out of the way a lot easier.
Yeah. But because it's doing that, as it's moving back, the chain's getting longer and there's a lot of pedal kickback.
Right.
So the pulley system isolates the pedals, the cranks from that chain growth.
Yeah, the idea is to try and limit the chain growth.
It does also move the instant center to, I think, the top of the pulley is where the line goes through now, or the middle of the pulley rather, no, top of the pulley, where the chain goes over the pulley. I think is probably the new instant center line, if I understand correctly, although probably I am definitely I know enough about this to get in trouble, not enough to not get in trouble.
That's where my mind was at. And then you started talking about the other parts of that where I was like, think I know where he's going, but he could be lying right now, and I wouldn't be able to say anything. I'd be none the wiser.
So Montner 12, hopefully we answered that in in-depth fashion enough. I think that's a good explanation.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you. How about we jump on to rotor size?
Yep.
Ooh, I like this one.
All right, so Jason asks us, Jason asks us, my bike currently has SRAM centerline rotors. I'm looking at upgrading my rotor size from currently running a 200 up front and a 180 on the rear to a 220 up front and a 200 on the rear. Are the new HS2 rotors worth the upgrade, or am I better off moving my front rotor to the back and only buying a 220 center line for the front? Ooh, several things going on there.
So we're talking rotor diameter change and rotor thickness change.
Nice.
Correct.
Yeah. I would say, from at least my standpoint on it.
Is that 1.8 to 195?
Yes. Well, no, it would be a 2.0. The
1.8 to
HS2s are 2.0 millimeter. SRAM, the standard centerline rotors, are only 1.8. I think a lot of that can come down to your brake as well. I know certain brakes can take larger thickness rotors easier than others. I assume if the bike came with center lines, it probably has SRAM brakes with it, which means it's totally compatible with running 2.0 mil rotors thickness-wise.
Yep.
The stopping power would, if that's the main goal, is to increase stopping power, that would be more of a diameter change, upgrading the size of the diameter.
Right.
If you're looking for a better feel at the lever, and a little bit, maybe possibly a firmer feel, possibly a little bit quicker engagement, or better heat dissipation, then that would be the thickness.
Yep.
I do think there's a lot of overlap between those two.
100%, because I think most people's brake problems are heat related.
More so than
More
not.
than
Yeah.
half. Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't often hear people complain about having too much stopping power. So my immediate, without knowing what kind of bike it's on, the riding characteristics of the rider, all that jazz. I've said it like 3 times now, making notes in my head. But without knowing any of that stuff, I would say
your catchphrase.
that and whatnot.
I think
those two.
I think Jason might ride a Specialized Levo SL and a Trek Fuel EXE.
But I think the quick answer is bigger rotors will make your brakes work better in a way that feels that you'll notice right away.
Right.
And thicker rotors will make your brakes work better in a way that you'll notice after you've been going downhill for a few minutes.
Right.
Yeah, I would say it's a subtle change versus a more noticeable change, both of which are incredibly positive changes. And in my mind, I go, why not both?
We definitely see a lot of people increasing rotor size, and diameter, and thickness, and it seems to be a almost universally happy outcome.
Yeah, run bigger rotors unless you're trying to save weight. In the least amount of words, that's generally the consensus I like to run.
I agree.
Yeah.
And just to make the counterpoint, don't run bigger rotors than you need to, because they're harder to keep from rubbing, and because that is not just that it's more weight, it's more unsprung weight, which is bad. It stops your suspension from working as well.
Sanjay's counterpart to that would be the run whatever is the largest rotor you can physically fit on your bike. And I just go back to the previous gen Santa Cruz Blur that he had 2 or 3 rotors with XT 4-pot brakes on, and it was just a hilarious looking bike. 100 mil travel fork, 100 mil travel shock with these massive 8-inch rotors.
Sanjay probably should run the biggest rotors he can find.
So I think it's because Sanjay rides down trails that I don't even think I could walk up or down without tumbling head over.
And he does it.
Feet.
He does it at kind of like an almost pro downhiller speed sometimes.
It looks reckless, but he's in control. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, his riding style is like sketchy rad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Jason asks another question on leverage rates. So his other question is, do you prefer a higher leverage rate suspension or lower leverage rate suspension? An example is on my Specialized Levo SL, has 150 millimeters of travel and a 55 millimeter stroke shock. It's 150 millimeters of travel and 55 millimeter stroke. And then his other bike is a Trek Fuel EXE, has 140 millimeters of travel and a 60 millimeter stroke shock. I find that the lower initial leverage rate suspension systems seem to have better small bump compliance and overall better traction. Just curious if that's something you ever take into consideration when buying a new bike.
I think it definitely can be. The biggest thing for me is I feel like on a shorter travel bike, I would be more inclined to run something with a lower leverage ratio because I'm going to be running an air shock on it, and the air shock progression will kind of counteract that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And a bike that's maybe a little bit longer travel, I would be totally fine with having the higher progression because it's going to give me a better opportunity to run a coil shock and have still incredibly good small bump compliance.
Okay, let's make sure we're not mixing up topics, because there's the overall average leverage rate, which is really how the question was framed, which is really just stroke over, like travel over stroke. And then there's the curve of what? Of
Leverage.
Oh, I was going off leverage curve.
Yeah, then
Okay.
there's the curve of where it is at any given point in the travel, which is what Zach was just talking about.
Right.
Let's start by talking about straight up average leverage ratios on bikes. We don't, and just assume we don't know what the curve is for a second.
Sure.
And talk trade-offs on that. And then let's talk about what really matters, which is the curve.
Right.
And point out that on that topic, whichever one it is, you can play with it with volume spacers. So average leverage ratio, there is just trade-offs. I would say higher ratio bikes, they do feel more sensitive over small bumps. A part of that is that the rear wheel has more of a mechanical advantage over the fork seal stiction. Any stiction in the system, the rear wheel has more mechanical advantage over it. It's more lost in the noise. I'd say that is a big advantage. The lower leverage bikes tend to be more linear through the mid-stroke, depending on what the curve is. In other words, unless they're manipulated let's just say that the leverage rate curve is a straight 45-degree line, which is kind of like the average of leverage rate curves. Yeah. In that case, the higher leverage shock will be kind of plusher in the mid-stroke, or the lower leverage rate, the shock that has more travel on the shock for every inch of travel that it has on the rear wheel. That there's less leverage, and also the shock won't work as hard. You'll overheat your oil and your air less. If you're a big person, I remember certain of higher leverage specialized bikes that we used to sell, you really couldn't get them a firm enough air spring for like a 250 pound plus rider because the leverage ratio was too high. So if you're a bigger rider who's kind of on the edge of what the bike can support, that a high leverage ratio might be bad for you. And interestingly enough, if you're a smaller rider that really, where the fork seals are a big part of the equation for moving the travel for you, also that lower leverage ratio bike might feel bad to you. But there's definitely advantages both ways. And then as Zach immediately jumped to you without even realizing it, because it's what really matters. What really matters is the curve.
Right, exactly. That's where my focus would be more on the curve itself versus the overall leverage ratio of the two. If I had to pick a leverage ratio, I more often than not would probably choose a lower leverage ratio because the leverage curve on that is probably going to be a little bit more, not necessarily fine-tunable, but a little bit more to what my riding style is going to be.
There is more space to move the line on the graph up and down.
Right, exactly. and what you were
and not be
referring-
taking up all the space on the graph.
Right.
Exactly, yeah. And the ability of the shock to be a little bit larger shock, having more oil volume and being able to work not as hard, it'll stay more consistent in its damping.
That's a really good point too. Any inconsistencies in anything like cavitation, foaming oil, anything like that is going to be magnified by a high leverage system and demagnified by a low leverage system.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think I do think the curve is the good thing to understand. And for the people who don't understand that, if you think about the way the links are shaped, the shock is not always through the stroke. It's not always compressing the same amount per inch of travel. So the curve is how that change is expressed. And a lot of times you'll see kind of a little bit kind of a little bit lower leverage towards the beginning of the stroke to help with platform support. You might see a little bit higher leverage towards the mid-stroke for mid-stroke's plushness, and then you might see back to an attempt to go back to a lower leverage towards the end of the travel to stop bottom out. Kind of typical. That's like one kind of common suspension design philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. That's I feel like after looking at multiple curves online, that's definitely where the trend with most kinematic designs tends to be.
Yeah. I like the Kona process concept where it is more almost just a straight 45-degree lineup. In other words, the progression of the bike getting stiffer is constant. It doesn't ramp up and then unramp up and then ramp up some more. It just ramps up and ramps up.
It's just consistent.
Yeah.
Consistency is easy to do setup on and tune because you have one independent system that you don't really need to adjust and account for. It's because it's the same way the entire way through. It makes setup a lot easier.
I think it's also more intuitive for the rider because there's less going
absolutely.
on. There's just less.
Positionally in the travel, it's the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the same, but it's changing.
It's an easier concept to understand if it is just a complete straight line.
I think the part of the body that can do things without processing them may not always understand nonlinear curves.
Right.
That's a good way to put it.
Next one.
Sure. Since we're talking about suspension, D. Benicasa.
Mr. Don from the Path.
Mr. Don.
I think I know that guy.
Yeah, you might know him. He asks, what is the new RS Vivid all about, and what's new about it?
Have you checked that shock out yet, Zach?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I was supposed to go to a seminar on it before it came out, and I was busy with like improvements at the new shop and stuff. I couldn't make it, so you could fill us in.
So the new Vivid, if you're not familiar with the old one, is RockShox's largest air volume shock intended for the enduro gravity crowd. It is very similar in overall design to the Float X2, where you have a piggyback on one side of the shock and a very large large air canister on the opposing side, instead of a more traditional Super Deluxe or Float X style, where the piggyback and the air can are on the same side. What that lets them do is design the internals in such a way where there is much more fluid capacity and much more tunability to finally adjust how the downhill performance is affected by the hydraulic circuits inside. I would say, from reading up on it without touching hands on it, I think in my mind the coolest thing about it is the position sensitive damping. I don't know if you've seen that on it, but it has essentially 3 different positions of damping. In the first,
are they independently adjustable?
No, so these aren't. They yes and no. In
Touchdown.
Yeah,
That's what they call it.
in the first 10% of travel, the compression adjusters don't impact that portion of travel in any way.
So it's just always off in that.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Fully
I
open.
love that.
Yeah, for the best small bump sensitivity.
Yeah.
From 10 to 80% of travel is where your high and low speed compression are going to be doing their actual work. And in that last 80 to 100% of travel is where your hydraulic bottom out adjuster comes into play. So it really lets you fine tune all the specific areas of the shock to really fine tune exactly how it's performing in certain sections of the shock's travel, which is kind of cool.
That first thing you said of the compression damping not really doing anything or just being set permanently really light in the first, what is it, 20%?
First 10%, 0 to 10.
And that's after SAG, I assume.
No, so they don't advertise it at SAG. They say the first 0 to 10% of shock travel is essentially not undamped isn't the right word, but
very light damping, and it doesn't change with
very light compression damping. The rebound still adjusts regularly all the way through.
I could see it being the other way on rebound. That's where you kind of want to get control of your rebound, if it's not already under
which
control.
is probably what it's doing.
Yeah,
because it has high speed, low speed rebound, I think, as well.
No, it's no high speed rebound. It's only low speed.
Oh, and
rebound.
then rebound. You're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Float X2 is the only one with high speed rebound still.
Right.
I heard the idea and I was like, I can't believe we haven't had that sooner. Like, that makes so much sense.
The position sensitive damping.
Well, just the part about it where what you tune doesn't affect the initial travel.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that is such a simple concept that just has never really been.
I do wonder I almost intuitively wonder, like, do they mean the first 10% after the first 30%? Like,
I'd have to look back at the Pink Bike article, but it didn't seem that way.
Okay.
I have to read. I know they just posted this morning. Pink Bike did an actual ride review on it because all the information that I got was just from their initial tech posting about it. But the actual ride review, they posted that this morning. I haven't got a chance to look at the actual.
Did it seem like they liked it?
They really liked it. Yeah. They openly compared it as the closest thing you can get to a Float X2 that's not a Float X2.
Did they like anything better about it than the Float X2?
Absolutely. The hydraulic bottom mount was a huge feature. Having that on there separately to your ramp up the volume reducers, having that as a separate adjustment is kind of nice.
Now, a Float X2, we can revalve for like a super heavy rider or a super light rider, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You could change the compression or the rebound tune on those via shim stacks.
And we do that here.
We can, yeah. We do all that stuff in house.
And do we think the Vivid's going to have that ability? Because the other RockShox shocks, I don't think do right now.
Notoriously, RockShox has been fairly limited on providing tunes in terms of shim stacks, or at least providing information on those shim stacks. We can get shim stacks from RockShox, but
if we call them and say, hey, like, we have someone who's blowing through all their travel, sag set it properly, lots of volume reducers, maybe they would send us a shim stack.
Quite possibly, yeah. I'd have to see how that is now with the new 2023 plus product line. That might be different. I'm not certain.
And you know how, like, the other RockShox rear shocks are a little bit more designed, a little bit less designed for long-term maintenance compared to Fox?
In theory, yeah. I would say an easy way to describe it is RockShox products in the past have been more easily serviceable by home mechanics. There's less proprietary tools.
But I'm also talking about the part where, like, when certain stuff wears out, you just throw it away. Is that true?
More or less. Comparatively to Fox, yes, absolutely. That doesn't.
Or
seem
you get a warranty replacement or whatever.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. The new RockShox line is definitely something to take a look at for long-term durability.
What about weight on the Vivid? Do you know?
I don't remember seeing a posting about it.
670 grams for the 230 by 65, no hardware. 670.
Do you have a point of reference for that?
Not compared to the Float X2. I'm not sure what that one is off the top of my head. I imagine it's fairly similar though, because they do advertise it as being a very similar size and shape.
I'm going to say it's very similar.
I'm saying 493 for 230 by 65. Float X2. Yeah, it's just a random answer. I don't even know the source, so.
Maybe it is heavier.
It looks heavier, and the old Vivid was heavier.
It was.
Oil's heavy.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was heavier because there is physically more going on inside that shock.
Do you know the price? Did we talk about that?
$699.
Available now?
Available from our distributors later September.
I'm interested. I liked the old Vivid.
The old Vivid was hugely popular when it came out. It stands to reason the new one would be fairly similar.
I rode the Vivid. I thought it was an amazing shock as well. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. I was almost going to ride an X2, but ended up not recently.
I think it's a nice looking shock also, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I like the shape.
It looks dapper.
It looks, to me, it looks kind of no nonsense. It's very straightforward looking and kind of like not as kind of like contoured.
It's kind of funny you say that because I remember reading what RockShox had advertised it was being incredibly silent through its travel. It operates very, very quietly, which kind of plays into that a little bit as well.
Cool.
Very no nonsense.
Yeah, looking forward to if anyone rides that, let us know. That'd be really cool. D. Benicasa, if you ride it, let us know as well.
Thanks, Don. You're the man.
All right. Let's see. Okay. I guess this is he says, in the West responds, and he says, I guess this might be a tech question. Bike security. Best method for hiding trackers. Ooh. Interesting.
Muck-Off makes a pretty cool one that is inside the tubeless valve. So it hides it would hide an air tag inside the tire.
Oh.
That's a good spot.
Yeah,
Is that on the Find My app also?
Well, it'd be through an Apple AirTag. So you install your own Apple AirTag in it, so it would be
So,
through Find My.
If it's an actual AirTag, I think that the person being tracked is going to get an alert on their iPhone that they're being tracked.
They will, absolutely.
So then it's hidden.
It's hidden
I
so
guess
that you wouldn't be able to remove it because
They'd have to look for it for a while.
If a thief ever found one of those, they get to keep the bike because that's some pretty high dedication to go find an AirTag inside.
Do you think
a tire.
it works with Cushcore?
I don't know
Because that would add to the level of
Yeah, exactly. No, I would
tamper-proof.
That's a pat on the back if a thief found that one after Cushcore. They earned that one.
And maybe you want the thief to know that he's being tracked.
Yeah.
I think there's pros and cons to both about knowing or not knowing.
Right. I do like the Nog Scout, even though it's not as hideable because it's also an alarm.
Right. And the alarm is...
You could probably hide it in your head tube or somewhere if you really wanted to.
They do sell it with a pair of essentially safety screws. You have to have a weird tool in order to remove. It fits pretty cleanly underneath a bottle cage on your bike, or if you have a spare accessory tool mount on the underside of the top tube, it's pretty easy to just throw on there. And I don't think it openly gives itself away as a tracker. Like it doesn't look like that. It's just a small little black rectangle. That's really all it looks like.
Really know what you're looking for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
maybe get like one of those Synchros under the water bottle tools too, which would just camouflage it even more.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say that the only downside I found to the Nog Scout is that it's not compatible with Android phones. It's only iPhone because it connects.
But that's true of an AirTag as well.
It's true. Absolutely. Yep, it is true of AirTag as well.
I don't think I've seen any trackers that are not kind of iPhone Find My oriented.
I don't know of any off the top of my head. I'm sure there are. I'm sure you can get some generic little geotag thing that you could hide somewhere.
I think the problem with it is that either you need it to have a battery so it can put out a signal, or it needs to work off some kind of network. So the Find My stuff, from what I understand, it only works if there's other people with iPhones around. But there's always other people with iPhones around, so it always works.
Yeah.
And that's how it gets away with not needing a battery. So I think that with that exact technology, I think it would have to be on something as dominant as the iPhone for it to work.
And that's kind of going into that too. That's the cool thing about the Nog Scout is that it doesn't necessarily need iPhones around it because it does have its own internal battery.
Oh, really?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
I have one on my Patrol, and I have to charge it maybe once every 4 months.
They said they might come out with an app eventually for Android.
It would be rad if they did. They would definitely open up the market a lot. Like I know I've talked to customers here that were looking to get one and then come to find out, hey, they're only iPhone compatible.
How loud is the alarm on those?
85 decibels, I think, maybe 90, right about there. And it's selectable. It's not permanently on. You can go into the Nog app and turn it on. So if you're going to go get coffee in the morning, leave the bike outside, you can
turn it off.
Press the button real quick, and
it's like a car alarm.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope I remember.
I've heard it's very loud. I have not actually heard it activated myself.
Enough, hopefully, to deter the friendly thief.
Deter them, or at least alert the owner. They're like, hey, someone's trying to jack your stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. I like the in the tire with Cushcore.
Yeah.
You want security.
Right.
That's security.
And they have to
Hey,
guess
who knew
which tire,
Cushcore
too.
could even solve your security?
Even if they know about
Right?
it,
I
they have
mean,
to guess which tire.
It's another
Yeah,
it's another
exactly.
application of Cushcore.
Well, that's the key. You put one in both.
Oh,
You get one out. There's still another one in there.
Oh, man. I'm still being tracked. All right, couple more. I think there's a couple more here. And these aren't so much techie, so we're kind of getting past the techie questions. Let's see. How big, in the West also asks, how big is too big for a group ride?
2.
I think it
I
depends.
was just going to say. Here.
I think it depends a lot on the nature of the ride. So like on like a shop ride, I feel like it's about maybe any more than about 15 per 2 shop employees who are, or, at a shop ride, we try to have a lead and a sweep. And I feel like for every lead and sweep you don't want to go too much over 15 people. And that's a lot. But if everyone's super self-sufficient and it's a social ride, for example, we used to go, the Share Mountain Bike Club used to put on a ride every Tuesday night in the El Moro parking lot, and the whole mountain biking scene would show up. It was this big social event, and really it was a big ride, but really it was a lot of
Pods
10 people rides.
Yeah. It's a bunch of individual 10-person rides.
Or you take a ride like our Bikes and Beers ride that we didn't do this year, that maybe it'll come back eventually, where we start with maybe 100 or 200 people and we ride together till we're not riding together, but everyone knows a rough route and has their own plan for what they're going to do.
Right. And there's a gathering point at the end, whatever.
Right. So I think it depends a lot on what you're trying to do, who's going on the ride, and what the goals are for the ride.
I mean, sometimes 2 is too big for a group ride.
It's true.
I have had that experience. I'm the type that I ride alone a lot.
But that's not a group ride.
That's not a group ride. But,
with all the voices in my head, it's definitely a group ride.
That actually is, especially when you don't ride with listening to podcasts. But I am almost always up to riding with somebody else. So most of the time when I see someone else riding, even sometimes strangers, I end up riding with them, and it ends up being a small group ride.
It's kind of funny. I've thought a similar thing. I would so much rather happenstance find someone at the trail or the trailhead instead of trying to plan a ride with someone. Oh, that's so much better.
Oh, man.
So much better.
But I have those rides too where, oh man, I've actually sort of seen people that I know. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, this is not a group ride.
I will not let this turn into a group
I'm
ride.
Like, I just kind of need to be in my own headspace and listen to the voices, over a time being. So sometimes 2 is too much for a group ride, I guess.
And you know how to fix that, though. Oh, yeah, I'm doing Choya repeats.
Right. But that might be the ride fantasy. Oh, no, I'm kidding. Anyways, that's it for our ride listener questions. So to everyone, Ed and Mottner and in the West, Don and Jason, thank you so much for your questions.
Yeah. All right. Any other topics you guys wanted to get on?
I mean,
there's one more.
Yeah,
okay. There's one more that I feel like is kind of the elephant in the room right now.
I've actually I felt bad because I picked up the elephant in the room and I walked out. And I didn't even talk to you about it.
Yeah, we didn't really get to discuss it much.
I know. And then I was like, man, should I call him? Wait, he's going to be on the podcast. I'll talk to him then.
Works out.
I almost brought the elephant with me and parked the elephant in the room, literally. But
it's a pretty lightweight elephant.
It is. It's not bad. It's 44.6.
Wow. That's
good.
Yeah,
44.6 with Cushcore. It's Cushcore XC, but yeah, it's Cushcore.
That's good.
And reserve wheels.
Mm-hmm.
So the elephant is the brainchild of Zach, and it's a modified Trans Giant 2024, whatever the latest Trans Advanced Elite E Plus. 2.
It's a 2 that's really not a 2 anymore because almost everything's been changed out on it.
Right.
But it's that burnt amber orange color of a 2.
Amber glow.
So it's mulleted, or MX. So
out of the box,
MX. But I did, so parts wise, what did I do to it? So the 2 comes with some pretty stock parts and what have you.
It comes as basically a full SLX build kit, brakes, drivetrain included with that, which is for the price. I think those are $7,200 for a full complete carbon frame, the Sync Drive Pro motor, a 400 watt-hour battery, and a complete SLX build kit.
Yep,
that's pretty good value for what it is.
Yeah. With a 36, a 36 performance.
Yeah, 36 performance and a DPS out back.
Yep. Okay, so what did we do to it? So even before it became Zach's brainchild, I put the reserve wheels on it with Cushcore. That lightened it up a whole bunch. I also put on an Axis drivetrain and Axis seat post.
The T-type or regular Axis?
Just regular Axis.
Yep, which is lighter. than T-type.
which is lighter than T-type, right? Let's see, what else did I do? Yep. So the cassette is Eagle cassette, or XX, either XO or XX Eagle cassette. So it's lightweight. And what else did I do? Oh,
Fork.
yeah, the fork with at the moving sale. I found a fantastic 36 factory fork, 160. So it comes stock 150, 140 travel front and rear. And so I put the 160 fork on it.
And it was sweet.
Yep. Oh, it has XTR for
piston brakes.
Piston brakes, yeah. So and then Zach texted me. So you want to pick it up from there, Zach?
Yeah, I'll kind of pick it up from there. So I'm kind of in between e-bikes right now, and I was looking for a new little project that could be something fun. I think it's no secret I like riding weird stuff. Nothing is stock in my stable of bikes, and going through and seeing a mixed wheel lightweight e-bike with full power was ticking a lot of boxes. That was a pretty good starting point. And getting one of those bikes on the sales floor and then being able to kind of partially disassemble it and find out a lot of the specs on it that aren't necessarily posted online, and looking up random parts online and trying to connect a ton of dots that are never supposed to be connected together. And we kind of came up with this perfect Frankenstein monster bike that is exactly that. It's no longer a little, I hate to call it short travel because it's not that, but more of a mid-travel, almost enduro-ish e-bike with XC e-bike weight.
Yeah, and full power.
Full power, but with damn near downhill bike geo.
Right.
And with no headset cable routing.
Because it did come stock with headset cable routing.
Yeah. And so any bike that has that on there is an immediate, hey, there's probably not much you can do to this. The cool
Especially
part,
in terms of like angle sets.
Yeah, specifically in terms of aftermarket.
Because it
sets.
comes with
or getting Zach to want to work on it. Just kidding. Zach resents it, but he is actually
I'll work on anything.
He's a wizard of e-bikes. And he can find your wiring problem or whatever.
Yeah. I'll work on anything, but I'll be screaming in the back occasionally, depending on the headset setup.
And stock geometry on this is like, it's posted at 65.5, but I really think it's like closer to 60, just a shade under 65.
Yeah, we actually measured the stock ones that we had here.
Oh, okay.
And they measure it in the low position at 65.7, high in 66.5.
Oh, wow.
And I tested it in both ways. It was exactly that.
Wow.
And doing the 180 flip to make sure that it's measuring the same in both directions. The one I had on the floor measured exactly 65.7 and 66.5.
Wow, so that's true to the published numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everyone's bike and tire setup will alter that to a certain extent, but in general, the one we had was exactly as advertised.
Okay.
And even kind of like maybe how your negative air pressures kind of balanced out might have altered it too.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%.
Right.
So we started with that, and we're talking exclusively in the low position because that's where Southern California riders run their bikes,
right,
obviously.
Right. Is there any other position?
And so starting at that 65.8, 65.7 mark, depending on the size of the bike, because they advertise it in two different ones. We took the internal routed headset out only because the frame of that giant is routed for Fox Live Valve. Now, you can only fit a certain amount of cables in the head tube or in the headset based off how Giant designed it, meaning what they did is they provided a little cable port on the non-drive side of the head tube area. There is a small port where the live valve wires run through. Auks bike didn't have live valve on it, so that port was just blank.
Right.
When he had moved it over to Axis and for the seat post and the drivetrain, that took away two cables. So the only things we have routed through the headset now were the rear brake, the and the remote wire. Those are the only two things we had going through. And so I kind of got to dig in and took the headset out of one of the bikes we had on the floor.
Dropper post?
Well, he acts as seat post.
Yeah,
right,
access seat post,
Yeah, so we only had the remote wire and the rear brake.
Yep.
And the idea was, I wonder if we can get those two cables and wires into that live valve port by using a different headset, which would let you, if you got a angle set headset, could throw that head tube angle out pretty far. Lo and behold, it worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
And we were able to get that rear brake and the remote wire into that live valve cable port, change out the headset from an internally routed setup into a 2-degree slackening Works Components headset, and it measured out to, with that, the 160 fork measured out to, what was it, like exactly 63 on the dot.
Yeah.
Which is 2.5 degrees off of stock from the high position, and
Right.
Definitely the new 65.
the new 65. Yeah, 63 is the new 65. But yeah, so basically completely altered the main, I would argue, one of the main geo points of that bike. Not that it was bad by any sense,
Right,
but a lot of, I would say the three of us are definitely on the slacker is better train.
Right.
We've been discussing for the whole life of the podcast, when are we going to find too slack? And I think we still haven't found it.
We haven't. I mean, the relay has like, it's
62.
62 and a half or something like that.
Yep.
I think it's straight 62 if I remember
62.
correctly.
Well,
Zach probably knows.
Yeah, it's 63 and 62.5. I think it's the same as the Spire. Should be right about there.
Oh, but if you run a 180 fork
If you,
instead of a 170 fork.
it's getting pretty slack. That's chopper.
because-
Although, I mean, that being said, my TR11 is also at a 61.8 degree head tube angle, so I can't really talk much there.
Yeah, so the 63, and then, so I was already thinking about, speaking of enduro downhill oriented rear shocks, I was already thinking about, and I did have it here in the shop, an X2, replacing the DPS with an X2.
Mm-hmm.
And the X2, we did confirm that in the 2023 X2s, you don't actually have to do the full disassembly.
To take the spacer out.
Yeah, and so the one that you had in the shop was a 185, 155, and the stock shock on the Trance is a 185, 52.5. And so, Zach, can you walk us? So I was like, "Ooh, I would love to run 150 or 55, but I'm not sure, especially because it has the little arch brace."
Yeah, the seat stay brace, or the bridge between the two.
Right.
For strength.
Is actually going to be the thing that contacts the seat post, not the tire. Is
Right.
in some bikes. So I think it's close. But Zach, can you walk us through kind of how you came about?
Yeah, so with those, what we're referring to is changing the stroke of the rear shock in order to increase the overall wheel travel of the bike based off of the stroke.
This is probably not an officially endorsed thing to
No,
do.
don't do this.
None of
don't,
this.
No one
is,
do this.
Any of this.
Don't do it.
Right.
It's not officially licensed by Giant. But technically it does fit if you run a 55.
Right.
So essentially, we wanted to measure the distance when the seat stay bridge touches the seat tube.
Yep.
When it does that, measure the distance between the upper shock bolt center down to the lower shock bolt center and figure out whatever that distance is. And I think it was 140 and
Right.
maybe something like that.
Right.
I can't remember the exact measurements, but
Right.
it was a certain amount. And the idea was taking a 185 shock and subtracting the stroke of 55 would bring it down to exactly 130 millimeters. So as long as the distance between the two mounting bolts when the seat tube was contacting the seat stay was shorter
Right.
than the compressed length of the shock, then the shock unlimited 55 stroke would fit, which would allow it to get an extra few millimeters of wheel travel. which should have brought it to about 147-ish rear wheel travel. So instead of running the stock 150, 140, you're now at 160, 147 and a half-ish.
Yep. That's, it's, yeah. And so they didn't have someone was working or purchasing the X2, but you did have a DHX2 coil.
Oh, shucks. You had to get the better performing one.
Had to get the coil, and you also happen to have the SLS spring that I needed as well. So that worked out.
The stars aligned to create something pretty cool.
And it is very cool.
Yeah.
It is really slack.
One of the things I like about it is that from the drive side, there's no cable management visible.
Yeah, there's none.
It's
you can't see a
clean.
single thing.
Right. Yeah.
I guess you don't really think about that when you're looking at, an e-bike specifically too. Having an e-bike with no visible cable routing.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It looks really clean.
That's what really kind of aesthetically jumped out to me about it.
Have you gotten a chance to ride it yet?
No.
Okay.
No.
Have you?
I have. I've rode it. I've only ridden it once, but I think I got, I don't know, 30, somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500 feet of up and down. So, riding it, having ridden it in its, 160, 140, which was closer to 65 degrees, very capable, riding down all, some pretty aggressive trails and enjoying it. When I hopped on this, it's so slack, just blowing out corners, I was like, whoa, my gosh, this thing is,
just such a different beast from what you had remembered.
It really is, right? Yeah. And then, but once you kind of adjust to it, I am running a 35 millimeter stem on it, so I think I might go with like a 40, somewhere between the 42,
I think
44.
you need to get your weight a little further forward to weight the front wheel.
That is actually what I was noticing, and I was really, once I kind of adjusted to that and was just got comfortable with how far forward I felt I was, it is an amazing ride. So the coil shock is obviously, I always think maybe I don't need a coil shock until I get a coil shock.
Yeah.
So more than the relay, I just never feel like I'm steering. I mean, just really everything is leaning, and I feel like that front wheel is just sitting in the parking lot. Feels like it's much more floppy than the relay. Does that make sense? I wonder why that would be. Maybe it's not making sense.
It's difficult to say because obviously we have done a ton of changes to that bike. So trying to compare it to something like your relay that is still relatively stock is a little bit difficult.
So
it's not
almost the same head angle, but you're getting more like steering flop on the trans.
Yeah.
Do you run the same stem length on your relay? Because your stem length will also affect how the steering feels a fair amount.
Yeah, that's where I think I'm going to go with the 42, 3, 4 millimeter.
Right. Yeah, because that's going to increase the weight that you'll be able to put on that front wheel, but it's also going to affect how that steering feels.
Bottom bracket height differences, do you know?
Oh, I haven't looked at
that could be a good part of
I
it,
bet
too.
that's part of, that's going to be part of the flop feel, I think. And also the difference in fork travel might be a variable.
Yeah.
And really that longer travel fork, even if it's got a lower static number, might ride steeper because it might sit deeper in the travel.
Yeah, true.
And you do have a Vorsprung on your relay, right?
I do have the Vorsprung.
Right.
So is there room in your life for both bikes?
I think there is, yes.
Like where do they differentiate other than that the trans has more motor?
I mean, that is a big differentiator.
Yeah. 80 newton meters versus 60.
Yep. And you really do cover a lot more, at least, you can cover a lot more distance in the same time with that 80 85 or 80, whatever it is. Let me see. Where do I feel like the differentiator is? The steeper and more technical the terrain got, the more I think that the relay feels at home.
More travel,
right?
It's just a bigger bike overall.
It's a bigger bike.
It
was 180, 160 versus 160, 147.
It was bigger before we Frankensteined the Trance, and it's still bigger after. So
Right.
that all tracks.
Yep. With that said, man, this is making me want to ride steeper and more technical stuff.
All right, let's go.
Let's go.
Give me a couple weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit of time.
Exactly.
Well, Auk and I should warm up before we ride with you anyway.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to. I might have to attend Lee's training seminar. I don't know if I know how to ride really.
Man. But Zach, let me. Man, there's so much going on in that approach, and I think people should listen to this a couple of times to kind of just the creativity to make this happen. The ports took a little bit of modification as well, right?
Yeah, so the bike comes with just a blank cable port, and I had to
Plugged.
It's plugged.
The port is plugged, right?
Yeah.
It's just a cover.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
small cover. And it's just a blank one that it comes with stock. And I was kind of looking at those, and a lot of the other newer Giants all use the same style cable port covers on the rest of their bikes. And I was okay, that would probably work. But if we were going to get cables in there, I got to go find one that's going to have two or three, depending on how much axis parts you have to run. And that's something to note as well, is that Giant doesn't exclusively make a 4-port cable port cover. So if you were running all the stock drivetrain parts, in theory you would have a shifter, a rear brake, a dropper, and a remote wire to run inside that. You could just run no cable port cover and it would look a little
Right.
But in theory you could do that. If you don't care about having power switch access, you could just remove your remote entirely and you'd have one less wire on there.
Like you did on your Rain. And
Like
then you
I did
just
that on
used
my
the
Rain.
main button for everything.
Yeah. I'm a huge advocate of riding an e-bike in full power mode or completely off. There is no in
Change
between.
the power with the main button or no?
You can, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the Reins, you can just use the power little display on the top tube.
I think you
press the
can
power
on
button.
the Trance as well.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same button. So you can also just change it through there.
Yep.
It's not as quick access, but it works totally fine.
That's a wireless power adjuster.
It is absolutely the one bummer
Actually,
you will
it's wired.
find.
It's just inside the frame.
Yeah. The one thing you will find that you do lose that is a nice feature to have, and you don't realize how much you miss it until you don't have it, is the walk assist.
Yeah.
Right.
You take the remote off, you lose your walk assist,
Right.
and that can suck for some of those climbs out of the Laguna area that you're definitely not supposed to ride. Ever.
Right. So that was awesome to see that. So did you actually have to Dremel the blank, or did you find a two?
No, I was able to
port?
find a
That's
2-port, specifically a 2-port cable cover
Right.
to run those in there. And
Looks-
I have a 3-port as well, so if you ended up moving to,
Like a
for
C.
some reason, a mechanical shifting, or if you
Right.
move to a mechanical
Mechanical
dropper
dropper,
post,
right.
if you wanted more travel out of it, because the axis post is limited to 170.
Right.
If you wanted to throw a 210-1 up in there, you could, because I have a 3-port.
I have really
cover
short
to put in
legs.
there.
I actually need a little bit shorter seat post.
Well, we're all set there then.
Fully heated, so it's not that bad.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to keep it this way. Let me see. The other thing that is really interesting is the calculation of whether or not you can pit a longer stroke shock. That was awesome.
Yeah,
very
that-
very ingenious way of calculating that.
Yeah, that was I've done that on several other bikes before, not exclusively Giants, but there's a lot of bikes that come spec'd with a certain stroke length of shock because it gives them a more round travel number, which just sounds better
Right.
to most companies. In my mind, that's kind of how that goes. But in some bikes, you can extend the stroke without issue to get a little bit more rear wheel travel.
Right.
Now, if that's a huge noticeable difference, maybe not. It could be completely placebo, but it does give you an extra little bit of travel.
Yeah, I mean it's a little more than 5% of the travel. Yeah. It is interesting. It's really close to some of the pivot travel numbers. 148, 147.
Kind of funny how that works out, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So if we're referring to the Shuttle AM that was just released recently with the new Bosch motor, that bike has a 185 by 55 shock, so exactly the same as your Trance.
Right.
It runs 148 millimeters of rear wheel travel, which is the same as your Trance.
Right.
And it runs a 160 fork,
Which is the same as the Trance.
is the same as the Trance.
Right. But it doesn't have a 63-degree head
It does
angle.
not have a 63-degree head tube angle, no. Not quite.
No, but you could. I don't know if you could. You'd have to figure some way to.
It probably would if you put a small rear wheel on it, but other stuff would get
Or an
weird
angle
too.
set.
It's true. That bike is full 29 with all that geo as
All
well.
right.
But the bottom rack would get real low, and the seat angle would get kind of slack.
But could you put an angle set on there? That's how we got it on here. It's actually-
You could. So pivots don't run any weird headset routing, stuff like that. They also just use a fairly typical ZS44, ZS56 head tube setup versus the Trance was a ZS56 straight all the way through.
So the angle set has to get shipped from across the pond, which took about a month. I think it got lost for a bit. And the day I actually got in touch with somebody there, they said, "Oh, we're going to ship you a new one." That's the day it showed up on my doorstep.
Nice.
So actually, I think it was maybe 5 weeks.
And yeah,
Not ideal, but it is as far as I'm aware right now, Works Components is the only manufacturer that's doing a ZS56, ZS56
Yes.
angled headset. The angle headset I like to run personally is the Wolf Tooth one.
Right.
I've had great experiences with those, and those are
same.
fantastic. But they only make those in a 44-56 configuration, a 44-49 setup as well, but not a 56 straight all the way
so
through.
I'll probably put one on my Shuttle AM
If
Yeah, Wolf.
we can absolutely do that,
Yeah.
when I get one.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed that Wolf 2 doesn't make the 56. But that's okay. The Works is
I imagine as these e-bikes become more and more popular, and non-e-bikes as well, I've been seeing a lot more bikes coming with a 56 straight all the way through.
right.
All the new transitions, the Patrol, the Spire, those are both 56 all the way through. Their TR11 downhill bike, that's 56 all the way through.
right.
The one exception right now is the Relay. That bike and a couple others from various manufacturers run a ZS56 upper and a ZS66 lower.
Is that also the Wild?
Oh yeah, that's
The Wild, the new Wild, I have to look into a little bit more. I don't know exactly what the new 2023 Wild is. The previous gen Wild was a ZS44, a ZS56. That one is running standard.
But that wasn't headset routed.
That wasn't headset routed, and it also used a knock block system in the headset to prevent the fork upper from contacting the down tube. So that's
Right.
another little weird.
Can you even fit a headset routing in a 44? Probably not.
Not that I've seen. It seems like all the headset routed bikes are running that 56 upper
Right.
in order to accommodate the extra diameter to get those cables in the steer tube as well.
Right. Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
What else you got?
That's I think that might be
Zach, parting shots?
Is that a part? That podcast?
it is.
That's a podcast.
All right. Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Auk. Thanks, Jake. Thanks to all the riders out there. Thanks to the rest of the Path crew. And thanks to all of the people who sell us stuff. Let's all remember to love the bikes we ride.